Did you know? At one point, the Nintendo 64 could have been the Sega 64. Plans for the N64 originated when Silicon Graphics Inc., or SGI, approached Nintendo with their new energy-efficient and cost-effective CPU. However, Nintendo were not their first choice. The processor was initially shown to Tom Kalinske, then CEO of Sega America. After some debate among Sega's hardware designers, the company declined SGI's offer. This was due to uncertainties about the chip's performance and associated manufacturing risks. Kalinske advised SGI founder Jim Clark to contact other manufacturers, which led to a successful pitch with Nintendo. The contract between Nintendo and SGI was signed in August 1993, and work began the following month. The time between the project's inception and its eventual release in June 1996 was fraught with delays. The setbacks came from Nintendo, who wanted to ensure enough games and a solid marketing plan were ready at launch. Inevitably, these delays brought trouble with them. To prevent impatient fans from buying other consoles during the 1995 holiday season, Nintendo ran advertisements well in advance of the N64's release. These ads boasted that the Nintendo 64 was well worth the wait. Only if you want the best. Nintendo's confidence in the N64 partly came from a previous venture with Silicon Graphics technology, Donkey Kong Country. Country's visuals played a key role in its massive success and allowed Nintendo to compete visually with emerging 32-bit systems. And since Sega were recklessly diving into the next generation with the Saturn, Nintendo felt comfortable delaying the N64 by 6 months to ensure its quality. These delays inadvertently led to major developments in the World Wide Web. Jim Clark resigned from SGI in February 1994 and began brainstorming new ideas alongside a software engineer named Mark Andreessen. Encouraged by Clark's previous experience with Nintendo, their first idea was an online service for the N64. When they discovered the system wasn't intended to ship until late 1995 at the time, they went back to the drawing board. The next project they eventually settled on was the world's first commercial web browser, NETSCAPE Navigator, which played a huge role in popularizing the internet as we know it today. Andreessen has himself speculated that the duo probably wouldn't have made NETSCAPE had the Nintendo 64 released earlier than it did. The console was intended to launch under the name Ultra 64 in the West and Ultra Famicom in Japan. The Ultra title was possibly intended as a reference to the several toys Nintendo manufactured in the 1960s. The Ultra line of toys included the Ultra Hand, the Ultra Scope, and the Ultra Machine. These were an early success for designer Gunpei Yokoi, who would later work on the D-Pad, Game Boy, and Metroid. While the industry speculated that the Ultra 64's name change was due to legal trouble with Konami, Nintendo offered another explanation. Nintendo 64 was a simple name that united the console under a single worldwide brand. The name was created by Shigesato Itoi, best known internationally for his work on Earthbound. He chose the name after hearing that people used Nintendo as a catch-all phrase for a game console, similar to how the name Hoover is used when referring to a vacuum cleaner. Itoi fell in love with the confident simplicity of the name Nintendo 64. In an interview with the Japanese magazine 64 Dream, he explained, "Instead of rashly trying to envision the near future or the next generation, I was hoping to name it something that would just force its opponent out of the ring head-on. When naming cars and coming up with sedans or whatever, you can't even keep track anymore. Super Excellent Sedan. It's disgraceful. So I made it the most orthodox name there is." Nintendo received criticism for using cartridges with the N64 as the rest of the industry had moved on to CD-ROM technology. The lack of memory in cartridges made high-quality audio and full-motion video challenging to produce. This inevitably led to third-party developers such as Capcom, Square, and Namco to favoring competing consoles over the N64. Nintendo justified their decision, arguing that the popularity of plug-and-play consoles was proof that a lack of load times was important to consumers. They also stated that using unique hardware made piracy more difficult on the N64. But other companies and critics were skeptical, accusing Nintendo of trying to maintain leverage over developers. former chairman of Nintendo of America, Howard Lincoln, strongly denied the accusations. Lincoln said, "I've seen speculation about how this was some plot to control third-party publishers. That's completely nonsense. There's just not a grain of truth in that thing. No discussion like that ever occurred. That was never an issue. It was strictly technology and counterfeiting." However, Lincoln believed that CD technology was still improving and Nintendo could change formats as soon as discs became the better choice. Eventually, talented developers were able to compress full-motion video and high-quality audio onto N64 cartridges. Angel Studios in particular managed to compress Resident Evil 2 from 2 CDs onto a single cartridge. The team had some difficulty doing this and severely underestimated what it would take to compress over 200 unique pieces of music onto a single cartridge. Under-budgeted as a result, they turned to Factor 5, a company notable for their ability to compress complicated audio onto N64 cartridges. Factor 5 previously helped with speech compression in Pokémon Stadium and even managed to include full audio commentary for every level in Star Wars Episode 1: Battle for Naboo. This commentary was regarded as one of the first of its kind in video games. Despite the efforts of Nintendo and their partners, the cartridge format had undeniable drawbacks. Cartridges were approximately 10 times more expensive to produce than CDs and took 2 to 3 weeks to manufacture, whereas CDs took 2 to 3 days. To counter this, Nintendo considered letting players bring their cartridges to participating Lawson stores across Japan and replace the software on the cartridge with another game. Dubbed the Game Kiosk, the plan was intended to offset both production costs for Nintendo and inventory risks for their stores. Nintendo had implemented a similar concept with the Famicom Disk Writer and the Nintendo Power kiosks in Japan, which allowed for data on Famicom discs and Super Famicom carts to be rewritten. Many Nintendo 64 games began as projects for the Nintendo 64's short-lived disc peripheral, the Nintendo 64 DD. Miyamoto himself has mentioned this fact, claiming that almost every new project he started for the console was originally for the 64 DD. Reasons for the peripheral's repeated delays have been kept vague, with Nintendo citing difficulties in developing both the drive and the discs themselves. Although the 64 DD was released exclusively in Japan, a collector and YouTube user known as Metal Jesus Rocks acquired an American 64 DD from an anonymous seller. The model is noteworthy not only because it's American, but also because of the stickers on its case. The labeling suggested that it was retail ready, or at the very least, a retail prototype. This means Nintendo was far closer to selling the 64 DD stateside than anyone had realized before. A version of Super Mario 64 has also been discovered for the 64 DD. This version was made for Nintendo Space World 1996 to promote the 64 DD and was discovered in a Japanese pre-owned game store. The game has few differences to the cartridge version and seems to omit more than it adds, such as Mario's head being absent from the title screen. And if you want even more Nintendo 64 facts, check out the last Did You Know Gaming video on the N64. If you like this video, give it a like and consider subscribing. And if you'd like to hear even more of my voice, you should check out one of my videos.